This IndyCar Silly Season update is brought to you by HelloFresh. As fall transitions to winter, there's nothing better than cozying up with a comforting, home-cooked meal. The holidays can be a hectic time, but HelloFresh keeps things simple with recipes and ingredients that cut out grocery shopping and limit meal prep time so you can spend more of the festive season with friends and family. You guys already know why HelloFresh is America's #1 food delivery kit. You get delicious meals that are fun to make, correctly proportioned as to not waste food, and sustainable. Nearly all of the packaging used to ship your food is made from recycled material. Go to HelloFresh.com and use the code LAND14 for up to 14 free meals and 3 free gifts. That's HelloFresh.com. Use the code LAND14 for up to 14 free meals and 3 free gifts. Now, for a long time, it looked like we were going to have around 28 full-time entries in IndyCar in 2022. But a few things have taken place, and it looks like the number of full-season points-paying entries will be around 26. Now, that being said, 27, 28, 29, even 30-car fields are likely throughout the season, but these will not all be full-time cars. You will not see all of the cars, stars, and drivers all year long in IndyCar. But since we've kind of last gone through this, and I did do an Indy 500 entry list video recently, even since then, things have changed. So let's talk about that. We'll start out with Andretti Autosport, as they were at the center of controversy throughout the fall months, as it looked like they were going to purchase Alfa Romeo Sauber. Now, of course, that sale has not taken place, and thus Colton Herta, who they were going to take to Formula One and replace with Kyle Kirkwood in IndyCar, that's not happening. Colton Herta will race in IndyCar next year in the 26 Gamebridge Honda, just like he did last year. Alexander Rossi will join him in what is his final year of a contract, so we'll be talking about him as a silly season protagonist next year. Romain Grosjean, who signed with the team and has already tested with them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the kind of badly kept secret of Devlin DeFrancesco, who is finally officially official at the number 29 Andretti Steinbrenner racing car. Easy for me to remember. What else is very interesting is a team that will not be seen next year. Carlin Racing. Rest and Pepperoni, they're gone. Their assets, at least on the IndyCar side, obviously they're not completely gone from racing, their IndyCar assets have been sold to Juncos Hollinger Racing. Now, many would assume that this would mean a second full-time car from Juncos. But according to my understanding of the situation, Callum Ilott will be the only full-time driver for Juncos Hollinger at this time. Now, that being said, a second car is going to be prepared for the Indianapolis 500. So there will be 2 Juncos Hollinger cars at the Indianapolis 500 and possibly a few more events throughout the year. But it will not be a full season car. AJ Foight Racing is another very interesting aspect of IndyCar Silly Season. They recently announced that they will be bringing in Indy Lights champion Kyle Kirkwood to the seat. Of course, Kirkwood was attached to Andretti Autosport, then he couldn't go there, then he got a 10-race offer to race at Arrow McLaren SP, turned them down to take the full-time ride at AJ Foight Racing. Now, do I suspect that this is a long-term deal with Kirkwood? No, I think he's going to be finding himself in an Andretti Autosport seat sooner rather than later, possibly replacing Alexander Rossi. But at least for this first year, it'll be interesting to see what he can do at AJ Foight Racing. He'll be joined by Dalton Kellett, who will be returning to the team once again. And it looks more and more likely, especially now that Carlin is out of the picture and that Juncos is not entering a second car throughout the season, that AJ Foight Racing will take on a third car. And it's been reported that Jack Aitken will be testing that car, though certainly has not been announced as a driver who could be running it the entire year. Myershank Racing is a pretty open and shut case. Elio Castroneves will be joining Simon Pagenaud at that team. A very, very strong team of former Penske drivers, particularly at the Indianapolis 500, where they finished first and third last year. Ed Carpenter Racing. Now, this team has 3 cars throughout the season, but there are only 2 full-time cars. So Rinus VeeKay has been locked in for quite a few months at this point. He'll return to the number 21 car. The problem is what is going to happen at the number 20, as recently it was announced that Air Force would not be renewing their contract with Ed Carpenter Racing. Now, Connor Daly and Ryan Hunter-Reay at the time were the front runners. Actually, Oliver Askew was also in that conversation, but now he has recently announced, as recently as today I should say, that he's going to Formula E. So this has opened up the 20 car to a few different suitors. And I do believe that one of the front runners, though it's kind of hard to nail down details on it, is Cusick Motorsports and Stefan Wilson. They have been looking for a ride, or they have been looking for a seat. They almost bought Carlin Racing. That ended up not happening. That team ended up getting purchased by Juncos Hollinger, but they have goals of racing next year. They have a sponsor, and I think that this would be a wise choice for them to kind of move into there. But I think, again, it kind of depends on whether or not Ryan Hunter-Reay can come up with any kind of a budget. But I think if it's not Wilson, it's not going to be Hunter-Reay or Daly either, unless they can get a miracle backer. Team Penske is another pretty cut and dry team. You have Joseph Newgarden, Will Power, and Scott McLaughlin. There will not be a 4th full-time car this year, and at this point, there are no official plans to enter a 4th car for Kyle Larson or anybody else at the Indianapolis 500. Does that mean there won't be a 4th Penske car at the Indianapolis 500? Well, I would point you back to last year. This was well before the Andretti Autosport partnership had been announced, which ultimately became a 5th Penske car at the Indianapolis 500. So I think you still got a couple of months before we know definitively whether or not Penske will run a 4th car at any point during the season. Dale Coyne Racing. Neither of these drivers are announced, but both of these drivers we absolutely expect to be in the seat. Takuma Sato moving over to Dale Coyne Racing and taking over the seat previously held by Romain Grosjean. And also Dave Malukas, who finished 2nd in the Indy Lights Championship this year, is already tested with Dale Coyne Racing and was quite impressive at that test. So I would expect only 2 full-time cars at this time from Dale Coyne Racing, but I'm highly suspicious that there will be a 3rd from that team, as is tradition, at the Indianapolis 500. Chip Ganassi Racing, the defending champions of the IndyCar Series, pretty cut and dry at this point. Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, Marcus Ericsson, Tony Kanaan, and Jimmy Johnson splitting the 4th 48 car for most of the races. Now, Tony Kanaan has a contract to run all of the ovals this year. It was a 2-year deal signed last year. But Jimmy Johnson will indeed run the Indianapolis 500 for Ganassi Racing. The real question mark left on Ganassi Racing is how many more ovals does Jimmy Johnson do? Does he do a full season? And then you start talking about, well, okay, what happens with Kanaan's team? How many sports car people can you pull from IMSA to create a pit crew and a total team effort to go forward with 5 cars? How many events can you actually do? The Indianapolis 500 is set in stone. The rest of the races, especially the oval races, that's the question of whether it's 4 or 5 cars from Ganassi. Arrow McLaren SP. Lots of talk about a 3rd car here. And I still think it will happen. It will not be a full-time entry. I think the fact that we know that they already offered Kyle Kirkwood 10 races gives us a pretty good idea of that's probably what their target is for this year, I would say. I would feel fairly confident in thinking we'll see the 3rd Arrow McLaren car at the majority of races next year, but probably not all of them. Pato Award and Felix Rosenquist were announced back at, I think it was Nashville, that they will be returning to the team. So it's been a while since we've known that team's completely locked in for next year. But it's not completely locked in for next year. It's just the 2 full-time cars are locked in. We still eagerly await who will be the 3rd driver in that team. We do know, of course, that Stoffel Vandoorne will be driving that car in a test on December 6th at Sebring. So that's probably a pretty good clue of what direction they may be headed. And finally, Rahal Letterman Lanigan. This was a team that had so much speculation around it, so many drivers in and out, who's in, who's out, who will get the seat. we now know the 3 drivers who will pilot the Rahal Letterman Lanigan cars next year. No surprise, Graham Rahal in the 15, Christian Lundgaard, who was so impressive at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in August, and Jack Harvey will be the driver who takes over the Hy-Vee number 45. And that will be a team that'll be quite interesting to watch. Essentially a complete rebuild in terms of the driver lineup from last year. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think Lundgaard's probably going to be pretty impressive. And Bobby Rahal, especially the team owner, is so high on Jack Harvey. I think they think they have something with him. And again, that'll be another interesting story to watch, to see how Jack Harvey can progress moving from Myershank to Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. So that is the silly season update as of right now. Certainly we'll come and revisit this later in the year, and certainly we'll also be talking about the Indianapolis 500, because it looks like, despite the fact that the grid seems to be contracting just a little bit, it looks like it's going to be a big entry still at the Indianapolis 500. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful, safe, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in the next video.